Scott County, providing safe, healthy, and livable communities.
Okay, we're going to move on to 7.1, and that is to receive information on Scott County Delivers topic specialty courts. And Chris Harder is going to kick us off on that. Thank you, Chris.
Good morning again, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. We are fortunate today to have, this is an annual presentation that Scott County Delivers to talk about specialty courts. We appreciate the involvement of Judge King and Captain Pearson. Captain, yes? No Zumba today. I saw you making that sign that there wouldn't be.
I don't Zumba.
Okay. As well as two people from our community who have graduated from the specialty court program, who are here today to speak a little bit about what parts of that program were helpful for them, and maybe in some, for all the love of data that we share, perhaps hearing from them will be as important as the data that we look at every year. So with that, I'm going to ask the people, the facilitators, to introduce themselves. Then Heidi, if you would start and just introduce who you are and what your role is here at the county, and then we'll get started.
Good morning, Jen Schwartz from Health and Human Services.
Good morning, Tony Winnicky, Transportation Services.
Hi, Kate Sedlacek, Environmental Services.
And then Heidi Kastma, I'm the coordinator for Veterans Treatment Court and the Adult Treatment Court.
Colleen King, I'm one of the judges here in Scott County. I preside over one of the treatment courts along with Judge Tanya O'Brien. I also help her with the Veterans Court. I'm a backup for that court.
Good morning, Stephanie Menning. I'm an assistant Scott County attorney. I'm the prosecutor assigned to both the Veterans Court and the Treatment Court.
Morning, Captain Jamie Pearson, Shakopee PD, and I am the law enforcement liaison on the team.
Carly Neslund, I am a graduate of Treatment Court.
Thanks for being here today, Carly.
Morning, I'm Robert Malls, and I'm also a graduate from Scott County Treatment Court.
Thanks so much for being with us today.
You're welcome.
So Carly and Robert, the way this works, and Heidi maybe told you that, we're going to ask some questions of people on this panel, and certainly feel free to speak to anything that you do or don't. If you don't feel comfortable responding to something, that's okay too. Okay? All right, Tony, will you start for us, please?
Sure. So, again, welcome. Thanks for coming, in particular, Carly and Robert. Really appreciate you guys being here. So maybe a rudimentary question for many people here. Your packet was fantastic. There's a lot of great data in here kind of describing that. But could you just kind of describe the programs, like how they started, what does it mean to graduate, kind of that duration, contact points over time, and what does that mean? So just kind of starting out with that base before we kind of get into some other questions.
Sure. So treatment courts originally started in 1986 in Miami. They saw like an influx of drug crimes. So they've been highly researched for over, 30 some years now. Our specific treatment court program started in 2016 in Scott County. The judicial bench was seeing kind of a rise in drug crimes, and then we were seeing an increase in overdose deaths, as well as the county board also was recognizing how can we work with mental health, chemical health, and prevent those people from being in custody. So the idea of a treatment court started. The concept of the program is to give, it's for high-risk, high-need individuals. What that means is high risk. If they didn't have any sort of intervention, they'd be likely to continue to get crimes, continue to be in our jails, continue to struggle with substance use. And then high risk just means, or high need, just means that they have a chemical health need and or mental health need that they need support around. So the concept of the program is to really cater to each individual, looking at them as an individual and what they need for support, what they need to address their chemical health, mental health. We have a mental health provider on our team that does a diagnostic assessment on everybody to make sure we're not missing anything that might be impacting them. Our program is structured into 5 phases. So the fastest you could get through would be 14 months. On average, it takes most participants 24 to 28 months to get through the program, unless you have Robert, who's a rock star and now blows that out of the water. And then through those phases, there's different kind of goals. The first phase is really treatment focused, getting them into whether that's residential, outpatient with lodging, whatever treatment need they have. That's kind of our first phase focus. Second phase is kind of that aftercare piece. Where are they going when they're done with treatment? Do they need kind of a sober housing? Do they need a reentry home? Do they have a stable family to go to? Kind of looking at that. And then third phase is really focusing on like the employment, the pro-social activities, how you're connecting to the community. And then phase 4 and 5 is really kind of allowing them the opportunity to show that they're engaged in the stuff that's going to work for them long term. Solidifying that employment or education, working on driver's license, making sure they have health care, like just making sure they have everything set up to be successful long term. With that, there's a lot of judicial interaction. They come weekly in the beginning and they're doing check-ins with the judge, giving updates on how they're doing on things. The judge is responding to them on, hey, if things are going well, they can have an opportunity to win gift cards, be incentivized for doing what they need to do. And then if things aren't, it's really looking at, well, what is the issue? Is it a treatment thing? Is it do you need therapy? Do you need this? Do you need more support? So really looking at how can we respond to give them what they need. And obviously at times too, there's punitive responses depending on the behaviors. As they progress, the interaction with the judge, the probation, all that kind of lowers to make sure that they're set up to be successful on their own. So in a snapshot, that's kind of what it looks like. And we have law enforcement checks. Yeah, sorry, forgot about that. We're very lucky and fortunate to have the local police departments partner with us. I would say Shakopee obviously is wonderful. Savage, all of them are great. But they also do curfew checks on our participants. Just kind of as a twofold thing. One, law enforcement, to give them the opportunity to see that people can change. Like, they shouldn't be defined by the history or what brought them into the system, and to show that people can change. And then two, for their participants to be allowed to see, like, hey, when I have law enforcement interaction, it's not always a negative thing. They can be here to support me. Shakopee has donated bikes to people, car seats, given people rides to drug testing, help people with job referrals. So it's a really great partnership that we have with law enforcement as well.
So I have a follow-up question, like Tony, trying to kind of better understand some of the terms that are in there. So a lot of the slides will say measures will be active, graduate, or termination. Can you give what is termination?
Yeah, so termination would just mean that we did accept them into the program. They were working with us, but for whatever reason, whether that's certain offenses they may be attained in the program, absconding, for whatever reason, they ended up getting terminated or discharged unsuccessfully from the program, and they didn't get to successfully complete and have the graduation and kind of the legal benefit of the program.
Is there an opportunity to in the program?
Yes, so it kind of depends. So if you're accepted into the program and say you would abscond or take off and go on warrant status, if you're on warrant status for 30 days, what happens is you get suspended from the program. And then when you're picked up, you have to kind of reapply to be reconsidered, to be brought back in. And you kind of have to pitch yourself to the team on what you'd be willing to change, what went wrong, maybe what services you didn't have to engage in. There's certain criteria where we wouldn't allow you back. If you are on warrant status more than 6 months, you don't have the opportunity to petition to come back in. And if you were to obtain an offense that's exclusionary from, so typically they're pretty violent offenses, then you wouldn't be allowed to petition to come back in.
Can I add just to the front end of that? Can you talk about the process and what determines if someone gets into the program or not?
Yeah, so we get referrals from different places. We get referrals from the judicial branch, from the county attorney's office, the public defender's office. We also have a self-referral tablet in the jail, so people can send me a notification saying, hey, I'm interested in treatment or vets court, and then I can go screen them for the program. We have self-referral stuff. Carly self-referred herself when she was facing a probation violation and kind of reached out. So there's all the different avenues on how people can get referred. Once they're referred, I screen everybody for the program. The screening includes a risk needs assessment tool, so we can determine if they're that high risk, high need qualifications that we take. So we complete a screening on that. And then we also collect a lot of background information. I think this is very helpful for the team to allow us to see people as a whole, not just look at what offense they are coming in on and what's their criminal history. We're really getting background on what was your upbringing like? When did your substance use start? How has that impacted you? How has your mental health impacted your life? Why are you ready to change? All sorts of different things, so we can kind of really look at the person as a whole. So once all that information is collected, the team reviews it together. We meet every Monday. So as long as they meet the high-risk high need and have a chemical health need, that's just the base minimum for qualifications. And then the county attorney's office does a legal screen. They collaborate with law enforcement as well, just to make sure there's no public safety concerns or information we might not be privy to that would prevent them from being in the program. And once all that is clear, then we move forward to take the steps to get them officially accepted.
Could we go to page 6, please? So this data is specific to people who commit felonies, but it's the data set that we use to look at crime recidivism in Scott County, and that green line indicates kind of a state performance target. And we have had some struggles in the last few years about recidivism, but that is starting to look a little better over the last couple of years. We're anxious to see what it looks like next year. So I'm wondering, particularly Stephanie and Judge King, if you could talk a little bit about what are you seeing that is positively contributing to people being able to remain crime-free? Like what is contributing to our improving performance here?
I think number one is just achieving some stability in their life. When you look at some of the statistics about what they had when they came into the program to when they left as far as housing, if we have many people that are starting out homeless, they're couch hopping, staying with friends, maybe in a bad relationship that they need to get out of, and they're stuck in that housing. Providing housing is one of the most important factors because it's just so hard to climb out of all of their financial addiction, mental health struggles when they don't have a stable home. Yeah. Also, having a stable job is incredibly important. And I think just access to all the resources. We have a participant that just got a vehicle, and I believe last week. It was the first time she was a licensed driver with insurance, owning her own vehicle in 7 years. And the pride that she had was just so heartwarming. And she'd been working on it very hard. And she was paying over $1,000 a month for car insurance based on her record. But she's doing fantastic. Having a vehicle and a license is such a huge factor in these people becoming successful. So those basic needs that people have to function in our society, those are as, I think, important as any necessarily substance abuse treatment that we're providing to people.
Nice.
And provide some stability going forward.
Yeah.
I agree. Just to kind of tag on to that a little bit. I mean, when I think of our treatment court program, it's holistic. We're trying to impact and touch every area of their lives and help them really lead their best life. Improved family relationships, improved relationships with children, better parenting, access to resources, and a really big one is mental health. I think when you're looking at this chart, you can see a little dip post-COVID. And I know we tend to blame a lot of things on COVID, but the truth is mental health is a huge growing concern. And getting folks access to therapy, to trauma-based therapy, to incorporating that into our program and recognizing the value of that has long-term impact on the lives of the participants. So really trying to help envelop every area of their life to help them be their best.
So that's sort of holistic.
Yes.
Kind of, okay, thanks.
So if we could go to page 14, I'll follow up with that because everything that you mentioned really, it does show up, that stability on page 14 and on 13. If you go back to that has to do with with minor children on 13, but 14, hits on so much of that, the success of the graduates in the program. And then conversely, those that are terminated, it's the opposite of that. Their chance of success isn't as great. So what do? You see that coming. First of all, with the ones that are graduating, when you're going through that, how much of this picture do you paint with them? Saying, this is what life can look like moving ahead. Look at the success that we've had, and this can be you. And so those that are, on that line of maybe reaching termination, is that information shared with them that just stick with it? There's a lot of great things that can happen here, and look at the success that those that have stuck with it are doing. And so maybe talking with Carly and Robert on that end, but thank you. Other comments? This snapshot does support everything you're saying.
Yeah, to answer one of the questions to that, when someone is approaching termination, we have a process called a roundtable, and that's where we sit and kind of do a one-on-one with the participant and the whole team. Normally, when participants are interacted with, it's with all their peers that are also involved in drug court in front of everybody. So we kind of take this time to really focus with them. We provide kind of our feedback on like where we might see them struggling, but we also really point out like, here's your strengths, here's your potential, like here's what you can get to, and we truly believe in you and we want this for you. But you have to take some ownership in it too. So we really do try to pull that out in the roundtable process before termination with people. And we have a probation officer here behind you, Kitty. And I think she does a wonderful job when she meets with people and kind of building that. And I think Carly and I don't know if you didn't have Katie too much, did you, Robert?
No, I had Katie at the end, yeah.
Yeah, and Katie does like a wonderful job too of like pulling that out and kind of that belief like, hey, you're doing well, here's where I see you improving. Like, hey, if you're struggling here, how can I help you? How can we be a support? So I think that's a great factor. And I don't know if either one of them want to speak to maybe how probation was different or what they kind of felt helped them kind of get through to the graduation piece. But
Can I ask that question just a little bit differently? So it's such a great opportunity for us that you two are here to speak about your experience. And the one of the purposes of these conversations with our board is to help identify what's working and what needs to be different or improved so people have a better experience. So could you speak to what about working with this program did you find most helpful in either staying crime-free or staying sober?
For me, it was, drug court or treatment court versus like regular probation. You have a lot more accountability, support, all around, and like in better incentives. Like the only incentive for like regular probation really for me would be to get off probation versus here, with all the support, and then the incentive of, the legal aspect when you graduate, and just the support and, the requirements, to get your GED or diploma, your license, a job, housing, it, sets you up to have a better, stable life, when you leave. So I think that piece is probably
that was really helpful for you.
Yeah.
How about you, Robert? What do you think they do well? What helped you?
Just to piggyback off what Carly said, yeah, the treatment court team is highly supportive. It's 100% set up for you to succeed if you so choose to participate and be active in it. From my experience, I've been in and out of the system for a long time in my life, most of my adult life. And regular probation, every time I would go into the probation office and meet with my officer, it always felt like I was being sized up, or, it was like almost just like they were just, there wasn't a whole lot of support there. It was just like what I was doing wrong. And I was doing wrong, there's no doubt about that. But with Katie, every time I would meet Katie, it was always this bubbly, smiling face. She's laughing, she's giggling, she's asking me personal questions. And it's like, you don't have that in regular probation. There's not support there. So there's not a whole lot of incentive for me to want to do right when it's just like, I'm just coming into an office to do a check, because with addiction, it's huge to have support. And these guys give more than the support you need if you so choose to participate.
So here's that tougher follow-up question. What could they do better? Like, what could be better to help people, even more people, be more successful? Because every program has weaknesses, right? Like, you guys would all agree. I think you'd invite the feedback as well.
To be completely 100% honest with you, I don't think that there's anything that they could do better. It's a really good program if you so choose to participate.
Okay.
And they do more than enough for me.
Okay, great.
I think it is more on like the participants. You know, like he said, if you choose to do it, you know, it does work. Like it is a long program, but in my opinion, that's like what is needed when, you know, you are using for so long, or, you know, with mental health and substance use. Like I didn't want to, I thought about, you know, treatment court you know, a couple years before I applied, but I wasn't ready, and I knew that they are, you know, stricter than, you know, regular probation, and it's a long program. But once I knew that, you know, I was ready, it's really, you know, not as hard as people think it, you know, might be, as long as you are doing what you're supposed to be doing. Yeah, I mean.
So I have a follow-up question to that, because I see that the data shows that the treatment court work, but not all referrals go into that, choose that path. So what can we do to get more people to choose that, or what are the factors that stop them from choosing to do the court? Is it that the work is, it seems hard, or but you don't know till you get in? Why don't all referrals choose treatment court?
So we do, if we go to page 8, we do have kind of the denials broken down. So for the people that got referred, and you can see one of the lines is client declined. So 20 of the referrals the client actually declined, but there's a majority of other reasons of why referrals don't get in. It could be their criminal history. They might have an offense that's a disqualifying offense in their criminal history, or their pending offense. There are a portion, you have to be a Scott County resident to participate, so sometimes we do get referrals that don't reside in the county. And there's a portion where you'll see noncompliance. That means they were screened, they maybe came in observed, but then they potentially could have taken off on warrant status, not continued to show up for the observation process or things like that. So there's a small portion that choose to decline. What we'll truly probably never know is if it's the fear of the structure of the program, if they just think regular probation is easier, but there's definitely a different amount as to why everybody referred is not accepted.
That was mine, was what could we do to improve that more referrals choose the program, seems to be.
Yeah, and I think a portion of that would come from, so when I screen them, I really try to articulate the benefits of the program. I think if you came in and just said, hey, you're going to be doing way more UAs, you're going to be, you know, and kind of doing all that, of course, that would probably deter and scare some people. But I think we have a great legal benefit. So everybody that comes into the program gets offered a stay of adjudication on their offense, which means if they graduate successfully, that offense is dismissed from their record. So for some people, keeping that off is a huge benefit. They also kind of have the benefit of being off probation earlier. Once they graduate from the program, there's a 6 months period after they graduate where they do a couple of check-ins with us just to make sure life's still going well, no issues or concerns. And at the end of that 6 months mark, if everything's going well, they'll be discharged successfully from probation. So really, I think a big piece is just pitching the benefits and like pitching how it can truly change your life, how you can end your cycle of being in and out of jail. You can, you know, reunify with your children and make all sorts of that progress. So it's really trying to, I think, pitch that to people. But I think, unfortunately, sometimes in active addiction, your brain's not really aligned with that sort of piece, and you're just thinking of how can I either get out of jail quick or how can I continue to get high, and some people just unfortunately aren't ready for the change.
So I'll follow up on that last comment, because Carly hit on that. You said you were ready. Yeah. So it took that point in her life that I'm ready for that change. So for some people, I imagine that's it. They're not ready. They're not committed to doing that. But once they are and they follow through, at the same time, I imagine it's not a linear path. That's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And so saying that everything was done, really well, Robert, I imagine, in that kind of up, down, but eventually, moving up, are the resources there when there is a little blip and you step back and now I got to kind of start at a different stage and to get back there. Did you find those resources? It sounds like you did, which is a great thing. You probably know others that either have been in the program and quit or were terminated. Is there any contact you've had with them to say, stick with it, it's a great program?
I have not necessarily like I work at a treatment facility as a tech, and I mean, I have shared my experience for not only like Scott County Drug Court, but you know, all the counties, and I definitely like recommend it and, you know, tell them the benefits, because there are a lot of people that come through that are thinking about entering into treatment court in some county or another. But I think for me at least, I think I even applied a couple years ago for drug court, and I ended up not going through with it because I wasn't ready, and it just seemed like a long program and, you know, a lot of requirements, but I ultimately just didn't want to be sober,
So when that happens or people are terminated, are they then tracked? Because again, the graduation success is fantastic. So in those situations, are those, or the next arrest or something, it's like, let's encourage them to get in and, you know, so do you see them again down the road if they're not getting in the first time or terminated? Are some of those getting back in a future state?
Yeah, so we track them as far as like recidivism goes. We don't necessarily track them to be like, oh, I see you got arrested, let's go rescreen you. But we have noticed either from like jail arrest or law enforcement reaching out that, hey, so-and-so did get arrested. And we have taken back some terminated people. I want to say there's about 4 to 6 that we've reaccepted back and tried to work with again. We currently have 2 or 3 right now in the program that were previously terminated that we're trying to work with again. So if you're terminated, it's not like we'll never work with you again. And we know just, you know, through their experience too, like you might not always be ready that first time around, and hopefully this next time we intervene with you might be the time that you can make like the long-term change.
I will tell you that I do look for common names, and if I see them on a jail roster, jail staff reaches out, child protection says, hey, are you aware of this person? I will reach out to the assigned prosecutor, or they will reach out to me and say, hey, we've seen this person again. Is this somebody that you think might be appropriate for the program? I hear it from public defenders, from jail staff, from law enforcement. It's really amazing to see the number of people that come forward to say, have you thought about this person? Is this person a good candidate? So you do see a lot of people working together to try to make the program available.
So I was wondering about that, Stephanie, because not everyone who goes through this program is successful.
Right.
And, you know, there's a data slide in the packet about just cost per participant, right? It's an expensive program. Is there any process, does your team have any process to look at, for those people who are not successful, are there system improvements that we could make?
Is there a process for that? I don't, you know, it's tough for me. When I look at the data and I look at numbers like that, I feel like they're a little bit unfair. I mean, I don't know that you can really quantify the amount of improvement to someone's life and then just systematically, like through their children, through their improved relationships, through their contributions to the community, through their education. It's tough for me to say, let's look at that number and how can we improve on it? So we do, I don't know if anybody else wants to speak to this, but every year we meet as a group, as a team, and we try to reflect on practices and look at ways to improve. So there is a process to try to address that, but the numbers are tough for me.
We just, as the materials noted, a number of us went to a conference down in Houston on best practices. And one of the classes I know a number of us attended was, have we done everything we can to avoid termination?
Yep.
And we actually got a checklist there, and we are incorporating that checklist going forward into our roundtables. So we identify, you know, what are all the areas? Have we hit everything we possibly could have? And just, for somebody to get to termination, it takes quite some time, and it takes a lot of sanctions that are going to be imposed before they get to that point. When somebody comes in the phase 1, we expect them to make a lot of mistakes, to have relapses.
Yes.
It's, treatment responses. It gets, more serious of a response as they go on, but we really have done everything we can. We've given many, many, many opportunities before we even get to the round table. It takes a lot of chances before you get to the round table. And we also really focus on best practices, definitely pushes this, incentives, that we try to change behavior through incentives, because studies show that's much more effective than sanctions. So, it goes from everything from, just positive encouragement, which actually has a huge impact on a lot of these people, but positive encouragement from, they say the prosecutor and the judge can be very rewarding to people, to, a reduction in their treatment court fees, to a gift card to Target if we have an MVP every week. So kind of the star of the group. There's a lot of, and people, if they don't have a sanction that week, they go into a fishbowl where they are, their names are being drawn for a small prize. So we've really worked with everybody in every way we can think of before they come near that termination stage.
Thank you.
So you had mentioned in phase 1, treatment is first. And I would imagine that's key. Kind of that's where you're expecting some missteps as they go through treatment. Is there enough treatment options available for the participants that go into the program? Is there any hurdles for them to get to treatment?
So within the county, there's not a ton that we can utilize. I mean, obviously we have a great working relationship with North Star, and that we have a treatment provider on our team from their agency. But really it is open up to other treatment centers within the metro area. And even at times we use, if someone might benefit from getting farther away from the cities for a while, we do utilize some treatment centers that are a little farther away. It's really, we leave that up to the treatment professionals. So the chemical health assessors that are doing the assessments, we really rely on their insight and professionalism to make the best referral for what sort of treatment our participants need. So whether that's, a residential treatment or an MICD program, we really just trust that the people assessing them are providing the best recommendations. We haven't run into an issue too often of finding a treatment center for somebody. Sometimes it's just more when there's that delay in treatment on how to best serve that participant while they're waiting to get into treatment.
I'm interested, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm interested in challenges from your different roles, and if you see potential solutions in your different parts of this program.
I mean, I can start. I think my role has gotten a lot easier over time. I've been with this team since the beginning. I have a great working relationship with the county attorney's office, and I think we've come a long way just when it comes to screening people and accepting people. They value the feedback from law enforcement, and we've got a good system that we use, and a lot of times come to a real good agreement. So, but sometimes that can be challenging. For me, I've got officers from whatever agency, whether it be Savage, Prior Lake, or my own, when I send out a referral, which includes, what their charges are, a picture of them, and give me any feedback you have, positive or negative. I'm going to share it with the county attorney's office. We're all kind of type A people, and getting buy-in from my partners can sometimes be difficult. So, if I'm getting 18 emails with all negative feedback, but the negative feedback is not productive because they don't understand our program, then I'm going to staff and I'm like, hey, here's all 18 emails, and all it really says is this person is a real problem in our community. Well, yeah, we know that. Like, that's why we're doing that. That's why we're here. We're having this discussion. So lots of feedback, not productive, but I feel like I need to share it because that's my job in this role, being the liaison between law enforcement and the team. So sometimes that can just become a struggle. And I think that's an area that I can improve on as well as the team, getting out and having those conversations with the officers in the communities, making sure they know exactly what this is about. It seems like every time you get into a deep conversation about drug court with a cop, when you tell them like, hey, this is kind of probation on steroids, this is hard work, and this is what it is, they're like, really? So, and that's on me, you know, we got to do better at making sure the cops understand the program. And I don't even know where I was going with that. I totally went off on a tangent.
Can I ask you
So Heidi, can I ask Jamie a question? We didn't ever get to page 12, but you hit on something. When I looked at that data, broke it down the other night, it was kind of interesting to me. Savage, Scott, Belplaine, Shakopee are all about 40 visits per graduate, and Savage is a little less than the one that terminated, but the rest are pretty close except Belplaine, even on the ones that terminated. But when you look at Prior Lake, Elko, and Jordan, not to call them out, they're under 20 visits, and you can see their graduation rates are not as good, right? And so I was curious from your perspective, because I remember when we went to this program, I'm probably one of the few that was around, maybe Barb was, but it really talked about this three-legged stool: addiction, mental health, and the relationship with law enforcement, and that these three legs were so critical, as well as the county attorney and judge commitment to it. But when I look at this, is there something we could be doing or should be doing as part of the program with those three communities? And then have you found that number for that visit? And I'm assuming each one is probably a little bit different. And then just Carly and Robert's maybe discussion on the importance of that relationship.
Sure. So I think you're going to see the numbers are varying for maybe a few different reasons. You know, I don't know if those communities just have less participants, so the numbers are naturally lower, right?
Well, it's I did it by rate. So I took the number by the graduate, or, you know, so and I'm not sure, it's probably not the same for each one, but there seems to be a difference in how many meetings each community is having for the success per graduate even.
And that's going to depend on agency, depend on officer. Like when I was a working sergeant at night and doing curfew checks, that was my priority for my shift. I'm getting out and doing checks and visits with all of my people twice, sometimes 3 times a week, because I loved doing it. Whereas maybe Elko isn't staffed well enough, or maybe they don't have as much of an interest in it, the specific officers, so they're not doing those checks as often. It's just, it's going to depend on the officer, their interest, the time that it takes. Do they have the time to do it? I think a lot of those factors come into play.
You know, you talked about that struggle earlier. Is there something we could be doing with the court itself and the training, or talking about the importance of that three-leg, or through scale talking about it with our communities?
I think it's easy. I think it's just a matter of us as a team getting out to the agencies and having those conversations. And we've talked about it Heidi and I have had a number of conversations over the years about doing this. It's just a matter of how do we get our whole team available for one day, sometimes 2 or 3 meetings to hit everybody in each agency. It's just schedules are hard, people are busy, but at the end of the day, it needs to be a priority, right? So.
And law enforcement is willing. I've had many conversations with individual officers, and I'll start by saying, can I tell you more about the program? Here's just a cheat sheet or an at-a-glance sheet to hit the high points, but let's talk. Officers have been really open to those conversations. And then the next step, once I have my foot in the door, then the next step is, can we do a training? Can we come and speak with you? And the agencies are all open to that.
Yeah, there just seems to be a discrepancy, Stephanie, per graduate on how many visits. And so is there something we could do? How do we support it? So that's great. I'm glad to hear you're having those conversations.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think it's training and education, right? And
Carly and Robert, I don't know if you guys could hit on the importance of that relationship with your mentor. I'm not even sure which communities you were from again, so.
I'm from Belle Plaine. And they come out frequently. I mean, so to the point, it was annoying.
Christmas presents.
And they come really late at night, like 3 o'clock in the morning, and super friendly. They like try to have a conversation with me for like 20 minutes sometimes. And I like the guy a lot. It's like, come on, man, I got to work in the morning, But yeah, I just think that interaction where they're just coming at a place where they're just checking in on you, making sure you're doing all right and doing what you're supposed to be doing. It's kind of like another accountability check. The treatment court offers a lot of accountability checks. And as a recovering addict and being in addiction, there's no accountability in addiction, none whatsoever. So that's huge, just that accountability piece. For me, it was personally, because that gave me a sense of pride and a sense of, accomplishment of just having some, accountability in my life, which I've never had before.
Yeah, Belle Plaine by far led per graduate in the amount of visits.
You don't have to tell me.
Robert had 105 curfew checks.
Yeah.
Yeah, during his time.
How many?
So 105.
Yeah, they had like 107, it says,
So
on
he got-
average per graduate. So
he
you're
got
very
all-
close.
They love to conversate at 3 in the morning. Must be pretty lonely on that night shift.
Carly?
I was in a sober house for the majority of my time, so I didn't, but my interactions with police just in general, and with, I think, needs more, awareness around, addiction and substance use as a whole, along with everyone. I think there's still like a stigma about it, and I think just educating, the officers and the different cities and stuff. I can't really speak to like the difference, in cities, but I think that's probably a big thing is there's a stigma, or they might not really know the importance of it, doing the curfew checks and just knowing about the program in general. So just educating.
Thank you.
What does that look like moving forward? So you graduated, you still have contacts? I mean, what does that mean? Is that just kind of as needed basis, or?
Oh, in my community, Belle Plaine, like, they all know me now. The cops that I used to run from, they vouch for me and stuff. Like, actually, one of the police officers I ran from in addiction and actually led him through a pretty wild chase through Belle Plaine. Actually, my boss that I had applied with, he called the officer, and he told him that I was a great guy, that I just needed a chance. So that speaks volumes for what this does. And then I just ran into him yesterday at the local grocery store. We were both getting lunch, and it's always, friendly 5-10 minute conversation on how you're doing. And that's with all the officers in town now. So it's a dramatic change, kind of like Carly was saying. I used to go from avoiding police to now it's like everywhere I run into them, I'm talking to them for like 10-15 minutes.
It's working.
Yeah. But once you graduate, you check in, like, because you're still on probation. You come back at 3 months and 6 months, and then if you're doing well, you are, get off probation, and so hopefully you won't have any more contact with the police other than general positive. Yeah, positive contact, but no more check-ins and stuff. So.
And I'll speak for law enforcement just in regard to that relationship after the fact. That's all driven by the participants, right? Like, I might want to have a relationship with a graduate on a professional level, but I'm not going to push that. I'm going to let them drive that train. So, for example, there was a participant from the beginning. I was there when she had her baby, and I just watched him get on the school bus for his first day of kindergarten. So, but she drives that bus. I don't. If she needs something, she knows she can reach out. She'll send me, it's his first day of school, if you want to see him get on the bus.
Wow.
So, but it's it depends on the participant, you know? They might not want that relationship 5 years later. But if they do, it's good that they're comfortable doing it.
That's a nice story. Before we wrap up questions, I just wanted to just focus for just a minute on Veterans Court. And there on page 17, there's just a look at the total referrals since May of 2020. And I know the narrative talked a little bit about like some uncertainty around future funding and that kind of thing. As things stand right now, are you continuing to take people into Veterans Court? So there's continued admittance into that program? And do you have a, how are you thinking through that? Like knowing that funding is sort of insecure, how are you planning as you take new people into that court?
Yeah, so we currently are operating as is. The county board graciously agreed to provide some continued funding while we navigate on a potential district-wide court. So we have 2 right now that we're going to be admitting pretty soon. As far as discussions for funding, that's kind of happening on a broader spectrum with Dakota, Carver County, and our county. Just like what would that look like? There's obviously state funding that the Carver Dakota County Court already gets. That funding is already allocated for the year. So then based off numbers, if we combine, that would kind of affect the potential funding from the state. And then discussions on, how you would fund together, whether each county puts in like a portion of something. So those discussions are still kind of going on. Obviously, there's always grant opportunities that can be looked at. But I think the first step is solidifying what would a district-wide court look like. And then once that's agreed upon, then kind of going into the funding and some
How
other
you pay
plan.
for it?
Yeah.
Okay. But you haven't felt the need at this point to pause intakes because of, as all that other work is happening?
Correct.
Okay, great. All right, last question from the facilitators.
I'd like to touch on the diversity for just a minute. Slide 9 and 10. Are there things we can do around race demographics to shift the dial there, or do you feel like?
No, yeah, we were actually just talking about that as well. That's definitely something that we need to focus on and be more aware of. And I think there is an equity and inclusion toolkit from All Rise, and All Rise is the organization that does all the best practice, all the research on specialty courts. They developed this tool where you can put all your data in, and it'll kind of give you feedback on where you're shy in things. And I think that's something we definitely need to evaluate as a team, and then look at, is it referral sources? Like, what is the reason most people of color are getting denied? Is it from the county attorney's office? Is it from offense stuff? Is it from, so we can really dive into, are there barriers as far as offenses go? Are there just like barriers in people of color having access to refer? Just kind of that whole education piece too. So I think that's something we're definitely going to have to pull our data out and evaluate as a team to make sure we don't have bias and make sure our program isn't set up with just factors that are excluding people of color.
Thank you.
Is that, so, trying to ask this question well. So we have lots of programs that come in and show that disparity in either outcomes or in your case, like admissions. Is there something, even something small that you can do in the next year to impact that? Like, I wonder how long we continue to look at data that shows disparities without being able to come forward and say, so we're doing different outreach, or we're doing different programming, or we're changing intake or whatever. Mm-hmm. So like understanding that my challenge in the next year, a year is not such a long time, but is there something that your team can look at, or that you are looking at, to impact that, or to target some kind of action to address that?
Yeah, and I think that would definitely be something easy for us to do. We have monthly meetings every month where we can get together and discuss like program things. So even if it's scheduling like a longer meeting, because an hour just obviously might not be enough to evaluate all this, but I definitely think we can get together as a team, now that we have a good amount of data too, and are, and we recently started using this tool. It's only been about a year or two, so we're finally getting data from that as well. So I think we have enough where we could definitely get together and kind of address this. And then it would kind of be those steps of, hey, do we need to look at eligibility criteria? And that would go back to like county attorney's office stuff. So I think that's a good first step, is just evaluating like where are we seeing these barriers at, and then how do we start addressing that?
Okay, thanks. With that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions or comments from the board? Commissioner Brecky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, everybody. It's always a great program. What I especially appreciate, and this is a luxury, right? It's a luxury to be able to have this team to wrap around these people, but I love that the team is always evaluating and improving and figuring out what we can do more, and we can learn from it. And I know we have, even in our broader community supervision and in the court system and other places, what we've learned that can help, that will help people from this work. We're trying, as much as resources will allow, to spread to the greater population that we're working with. I think I just want to continue that. And I especially this time, now that we've kind of each year seen this evaluation, these gaps, I look to us as a board and us as administration and even the talk of our work earlier in partnership, these gaps are all about partnership. This is kind of on us and what we can do to continue to see if we can meet some of those gaps, because that'll make your work easier. It'll make the outcomes better, and all that. So that's one big takeaway I had. The other thing is, I think we want to continue, as long as we have these programs, we want them to be at capacity, because we want that good work to happen. So it's looking good, but anything that we can do from this level to continue to support that is important, because that's going to, I know that's hard and that's a lot of work, but if it's at capacity, it's going to yield to the long-term sustainability of the programs too. So just some comments, I guess. Thank you. I have some more for specific people, but we'll get those out there. And thanks for doing this work every day.
Okay, thank you. Anybody? Commissioner Ehrlich.
Well, I just want to suggest that this would be a very good topic at scale, our scale partners, so that you can communicate what you're doing and awareness what you're doing, and the community can even rally more around what you're doing, because they would be aware. It's great work, and the cost of this, the success that you have is much cheaper than the cost of failure. And the cost of someone that's not succeeding in life is pretty high to a society. So thank you for all that you do.
Okay. Commissioner Beer.
Thank you very much. Yes, I mean, it's all good work, and it's messy. It's relationships, and relationships seem like they're always messy, and it takes community. 107, was that, or no, 105 check-ins, is that what it was? At 3 in the morning? It's impressive.
Not all at 3.
But not, maybe 2:30 at 3. Lonely in Belle Plaine, I think is what you said, right, at night? Yeah. So that community it's great to have those guardrails now, everyone's sitting at the table, and then you graduate. And yes, you let them drive the train, but is there you went to best practices, they talk about, how do you, kind of the launching, so to speak, how to build that community? Because every time I've seen solid community, you have to want it. And I think I've heard you both say that you chose this. I'm in on doing this and making it happen. So there was that self-awareness to make that choice. But then to have that community after the fact, while you've got it knocking on your door at 3 in the morning, now you're graduated. Is there a way to help, or maybe there is, to help build that community that you want and you're willing to fight for to maintain it? That's what I always think about. This is awesome. I mean, having these opportunities, but then you kind of spin that top and here you go, like a teen challenge kind of deal. They have this great program, and then, ooh, now what? Is there ways to, and I'm not necessarily saying it's the county, but ways to help facilitate and manage that kind of community?
Yeah, so I can kind of talk to that a little bit. So at the national conference we just went to that does teach and educate on best practices, Recovery Capital is a very big thing that they're focusing on, and Recovery Capital is looking kind of at that community support, but as well as the holistic support for that individual. So education, healthcare, employment, community support, and the fact of, do they know where to get resources if they're struggling? Do they have a community support in like a peer recovery network, whether that's through church, AA, NA? So we are going to be incorporating recovery capital into our phase applications as they advance, where they're going to be kind of doing an assessment on where are they with recovery capital, where are they with like needs they might still potentially have. And best practice as well has kind of set up phases to make sure we're incorporating that for people as they do prepare for graduation. So within phases, that's where like pro-social activities, like what are you doing for like sober fun? Like we all need that in our life. What are you doing for your peer support? Who do you have for those supportive relationships? And those are all kind of getting incorporated as they get closer to graduation. And the last two phases are set up to design where we're already kind of backing off and we're really letting them drive the bus and making sure like, hey, you're ready to do this on your own without us, but we're still here in case, but it's designed that way to kind of make sure they're set up for that success once we are completely gone.
So the recovery capital is a protocol or it's a nonprofit? Like, it sounds like a...
Oh, it's more of a protocol, not like a nonprofit. So it's really just looking at the areas of someone's life.
Yeah.
And just assessing on where they're at with those areas, where they feel they could grow in them, where they feel they might need support, and then us having resources to provide for that. Okay, if it's community stuff, here's different meetings you can go to. If it's lack of maybe some social network, like here's some sober organizations, or here's a peer recovery specialist that's designed with life experience to connect you to all these community supports and get you engaged so you're set up for that long-term recovery.
So let's just say there was a county that was willing and work with other partners and nonprofits and maybe even a faith group from time to time. That would be a good thing to help bring those partners together to help facilitate that type of continued walk.
Yes,
I hope to be a county like that someday. Wait, we are. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Okay.
I really don't have much to say. I think everybody said it, but I really want to thank the two graduates that are here today. What a hard work that you've been through, and standing here, sitting here, being with us. That's difficult too. So congratulations and keep going. And yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, with that, thank you to the entire panel for coming, especially our two guests, Robert and Carly. So let's give them a hand. Thank you.